If you get up early enough, the street itself can be your sidewalk. But this isn't really a story about the virtues of early rising. This is a story about the buffalo. What they did to the buffalo and why. In 1829, almost 200 years ago now, yet another baby was born into the world. The people who would later conquer his people called those people Apaches. But that wouldn't be for a while yet. His family decided to call him the one who yawns. I can't pronounce the one who yawns in the language of his family and his people. But again, we can fall back on what the victors in the war called him. His name was Geronimo. So as Geronimo grew up, he lived down to the southeast of here, in the southwest, in the lands I still love best. I don't know what he called those lands beyond home. We call them the Gila Wilderness. When it came to the choice that all of us face, that is to say, to lead or follow or get the hell out of the way, Geronimo chose the first one. He became a leader of his people. Eventually, the leader of his people. And he fought the colonizers, the pioneers, to a standstill for a longer time than almost anyone else. When he was an old man, and who am I to talk, he eventually surrendered to the invaders on 3 separate occasions. And after they locked him up on reservations or in prisons, 3 times he escaped, taking as many of his people as he could with him, and he went home to the wilderness, the ever-shrinking wilderness. Finally, the authority grew sick of his shit, and they brought him right here. To Bucket of Blood Street, with its historic saloon. They brought him to this very train platform, and they loaded him, at long last, onto a train, headed east into the rising sun to yet another reservation. He was, according to the Wikipedia page on his life, exhibited like something from a freak circus, like a zoo animal, by the United States government at various fairs and other cultural gatherings. And he died in the flatlands of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, at a ripe old age. What I really want to talk about, though, is our role as the beneficiaries of the victory over Geronimo and his people. When we go clear back to the American Revolution, we talk about colonies and colonizers, and we celebrate the merchants who dressed up as Native Americans in order to throw tea over the sides of a British ship into Boston Harbor. But what gets lost in the telling of that story is that we were no better than the king. We held certain truths to be self-evident, and we wrote down the ones that sounded good, but the important right that we were fighting for was the ability to become the colonizers ourselves and to make a living from this raw, untamed land. So throughout the 19th century, the 1800s, we pursued on many fronts, not just slavery and not just wars over whether people should be allowed to enslave others directly, but we pursued a policy of exterminating the buffalo. Why did we exterminate the buffalo? Most people assume that it was for the meat, for money from the hides, but it was more than that. It was a deliberate policy of extermination. And the stated reason for the policy of exterminating the buffalo was that so long as the buffalo roamed, they provided a living to the indigenous inhabitants, the natives, the Indians, the Apache, and the Sioux, and all the other unnamed tribes, or badly named tribes, that we know virtually nothing about in our modern arrogance. Without the buffalo herds, without wilderness on which to hunt and gather, the Indians could not be free. The native peoples had no way to make their living independent from the system. So wiping out the buffalo was a destruction of an ecosystem. And remember that the word eco in the Greek is the source of both ecology, but also economics. We killed the buffalo in order to make it impossible for people to live free without us. To my mind, that's almost worse than slavery. Or maybe it's just the same thing. We enslaved Africans and others directly. We enslaved Geronimo indirectly. And every single one of us is still a victim of that same process of enslavement, because there are no more buffalo to hunt. There is no more wilderness upon which to gather. So you better get a job, son. You better bend the knee. You better grow up and realize that being part of this system comes with a great cost. A cost in time. A cost of your years. A cost of your labor. A cost of your conscious bandwidth. And if you're not willing to pay that cost and buckle down and set the alarm and go to work for the man every day, or become the man yourself in some entrepreneurial way, then you can just fuck off and die. You certainly are free to get on the train instead, like so much baggage. Even before the war was over, even before Geronimo was finally and properly enslaved, we began to build over the top of the wilderness. We built our rail lines and rail cars. We piled up rocks. We piled up sand. We made concrete. We chopped down the trees for pretty little cabins. We shot the buffalo, took their hides, and left the meat to rot. We built buildings, habitations, mainly not so pretty as those cabins. We built cars and trucks. We built RVs, and we drove them to death, and we parked them. We built grocery stores and shopping carts, motels, hotels, diners, fast food joints. We built fast, and we built cheap, and we built ugly. We built, and we built, and we built. And none of it was very pretty. And none of it was very sane. Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam. That place doesn't exist anymore. Early on in this channel, I was very much concerned with that question about whether to lead or to follow or get the hell out of the way. And I told you that I was very much of the opinion that getting the hell out of the way was the best option, and that my job now was to figure out where the hell out of the way even was. In the course of walking every day anyway, I've kept that in mind. I have taken it as my duty and responsibility to locate this mythical hell out of the way. And I even found it, to the extent that it still exists, behind that sign. And it's on the other side of that barbed wire fence. To find the hell out of the way, I had to find 3 separate places where somebody had knocked down the barbed wire fence. I don't know who that was, but I am grateful to them. It allowed my project in Hell Outa to proceed without making me directly criminally responsible. My crime came later. My crime is shooting this video as the sun comes up and posting it for y'all. It wasn't easy to get the hell out of the way. But now it's done. And by the way, I'm pretty sure the monsoons have started way up there in the White Mountains in Apacheria, because there's a whole lot more water flowing than there was even yesterday, even though we've seen no rain ourselves here. And here we are. Yesterday I called this a holy place, and I stand by that. But the holy place is very much a desecrated temple. Most of the water has been stolen away to feed the power system and the agricultural system upstream, and that is upstream. But more importantly, the only thing that makes this hell out of the way holy is that it's largely been abandoned by the people who exploited it and then moved on. So they're not here, and their absence pushes hell out of the way into the direction of holiness. It still doesn't mean that it's free, that it's possible to live in freedom here, because it's not wilderness. It is of insufficient quality of wild to go a hunting and a gathering. The buffalo are gone. They've left the coyotes, the ravens behind, and a few other little birds. Which are, no mistaking, a blessing. But in spite of being a blessing, they're not going to save us from Moloch, from the system that we've all helped to create, that we all have taken our living from, the system that is symbolized by that sound of the train horn, the ugly sound, as compared to the song of the remnant of little birds, the pretty sound. Now listen, especially for somebody who talks so much. I know hardly anything. But I do know that it makes no damn difference at all to the cause of freedom whether we elect the red devil or the blue devil next year. Even if we elect the green angel, the system goes on. The system abides. And all over again, we are forced into that choice, whether we want to help lead the system or whether we just want to be a good follower in the system, or whether we want to get the hell out of the way. The problem is that choice that we've been given isn't really a choice at all. Lead and follow amount to the same thing. They lead to the same place. Enslavement and enmeshment within the system, and becoming evil yourself, eventually. As contrasted to Geronimo, this culture chooses to celebrate the Nez Perce chief, Joseph. I don't think Joseph was his real name either. But he's famous, and made more famous in this culture, for saying at last, "I will fight no more forever." So he's a pacifist icon, right? As opposed to Geronimo busting out of jail 3 times before they had to lock him up for good on the 4th. "I will fight no more forever" is not a motto or an anthem about pacifism. "I will fight no more forever" is an admission of total defeat, that the bad guys won, that we're not going to make it all the way to Canada to be ruled in turn by a different set of bad guys. Chief Joseph was saying, "Screw it, I'm done." And that satisfies us deeply, not for the reasons that we think it does, but because we are not who we think we are.